Welcome to the Recombination Nation podcast. Today I have an extraordinary guest, not too far from my home base in Australia, in New Zealand. I'm talking to Mark Christensen, the research director at Heritage Foods Crop Research Trust in Wanganui, I think I remember, up in the North
Wangan
Island. Wanganui, Wanganui.
Yes.
Um, so I've learned a bit about your work, refining and breeding and selecting crops in New Zealand, with a focus on the embodied health properties of those crops, rather than continuing the trend of the last century of breeding crops just for profit. You're looking at various methods for breeding crops for improving the health of the people eating them. And I think that's a really interesting trend that's emerged to some degree in commercial breeding, but you're doing it on a smaller, more flexible scale, which I think offers amazing opportunities. So I'll throw over to you to give a bit more introduction into who you are and how you came to this very extraordinary position in life. And I'm keen to learn too, because yeah, your organization is amazing. Check out the website. We'll drop the links at the end to all the audience. But yeah, who you are as a person and how you ended up doing this particular thing is a question that I am dying to learn more about.
Yes. Well, as a person, of course, I had a career as a chartered accountant. I was in accountancy for 42 years. Um, but also I had a passion for gardening, for growing trees and plants. And when I got into the research side, when that also became a passion, um, when I received data from the scientists, chemical analysis of apples and tomatoes, of course, the data all comes as numbers. And being an accountant, I love the numbers and then working out what it all means. So putting them into spreadsheets and really, when you're growing the plants, when you're selecting the fruit, you're sending it away, you're getting the numbers back, it all becomes more meaningful. And you can really question, you know, why you're getting these results,
Hmm.
what's bringing that about. So we formed a charitable trust in 2007. I'd actually started my research journey in 2002. I had um, I had neighbours and clients with cancer at the time. And so it led me to start questioning, what caused cancer and actually what could be done to prevent cancer from developing. And that led me to start asking questions and led me to the inverse relationship between apples and cancer. And so that got me into the apple research. Um, And then that followed on with tomato research, looking at lycopene and the different forms of lycopene that can be in different tomato varieties. And then we started looking at wheat, heritage wheat varieties, and gluten intolerance. Along the way, we collected an extensive number of bean varieties. We grew 104 different bean varieties last year. And we're also looking at other crops.
Hmm.
We're playing around with kiwi fruit and cherimoyas and avocados, honeyberries, and our latest research initiative is on carrots.
Hmm. Hmm.
But fundamentally, yes, we're looking for the very best varieties for human health and the prevention of disease.
And it's interesting because in the distant past, people would start growing and consuming various combinations of crops, and the test would be whether they survived the winter, if they starved, or if they survived the next plague or disease, like whatever stress was put upon them as people. If their diet made a difference in them surviving, then that form of diet would like propagate and survive into the future. And we don't necessarily have to do it such a harsh way anymore. There's other tools at our disposal to understand what the health impacts are of our very complex diets. And we've also probably had some of the largest dietary shifts in the last 100 years, particularly in the
Mm,
Western world, and there are very clear associations to changes in health, particularly chronic health conditions as a result. But disentangling all of those parts is
mm,
it's a huge challenge, and even just having
yeah,
the right tools, the right foods at our disposal to do the analysis is like such a critical starting point. So yeah, I'm amazed at the work that you're doing, and coming at it as a data-driven amateur is a really rare combination as well too, because when you start measuring everything in plant breeding, it can very quickly get overwhelming. You can have so many numbers to consider that a person who isn't trained numerically can get overwhelmed. So that's a really interesting thing that we might have to touch on again. So,
yeah.
well, let's move on to talking about specific crops. That's the way I normally like to structure the conversations. Do you want to tell us more about what you've discovered about tomatoes? And I thought I knew a bit more than the average person about the history of tomato domestication and breeding, and you've shone a completely new light on that history. And I have a background in organic chemistry as well too, so all of this made perfect sense to me when I saw it. So yeah,
Yes,
tell
it's
us that
fascinating.
story. Tell us that
Um,
fascinating story.
well, again, it was the cancer. Um, Lycopene is a major compound in many tomato varieties, and it's an anti-cancer compound. It's a powerful antioxidant, can help to prevent heart disease and certain types of cancer. Prostate cancer, for instance, there's been many tests on that. Um, so we started in 2007 collecting all the tomato varieties that we could find in New Zealand, growing them, sending them away for chemical analysis. We looked at all the different colors, shapes, and sizes, and we've had over probably 600 at least varieties chemically analyzed. So, so yes, we did all the different colors. And of course, lycopene is generally regarded as the red color in red tomatoes. So it's the compound that gives you the red coloring of the skin. But that's called all trans lycopene, and it's got a linear molecular structure, and it's not easily absorbed by humans. In order to improve the availability of that lycopene, you've got to subject it to intense heat and eat it with a source of fat because lycopene is fat soluble. Hence the advice to cook your red tomatoes. So that's all well and good. However, we found that there is another form of lycopene in some golden orange tomatoes. So tomatoes within the golden to orange color spectrum. Not all of them, but in some of those varieties, there is a form of lycopene called tetracis lycopene. And American scientists had done a number of studies on these and found that they were much more bioavailable when cooked in various soups or juices. They'd looked at those studies because of the for commercial reasons. You know, the reason that they do research is for industry. And so they're looking at products that industry will use. And so one of the scientists I was connecting with, they had bred orange tomatoes. They were dwarf varieties that they could grow in paddocks, and the machinery would just come across and harvest all in one go. And that was for the canning industry, and that was their focus. We, on the other hand, were coming from a grassroots approach, wanting a very healthy tomato that could help to prevent cancer for someone growing tomatoes in their backyard. And so we were looking at an heirloom variety, one that was not hybridized, so you could save your own seed. And so we imported, um, I think in 2012, we might have imported uh, 74 varieties in that golden to orange color spectrum. Out of those, we found a variety called Moonglow, which had the highest levels of tetracis lycopene at that point. Um, we then contracted one of the largest research organizations in New Zealand to do a human trial for us to test out what the bioavailability would be if they were eaten raw.
Hmm.
So not cooked, but eaten raw. And this organization, they had 13 of their staff members, uh, ate, first of all, a high lycopene red tomato and a high lycopene orange tomato from ours, this Moonglow. And the absorption was incredible from the orange tomato. It was the absorption from the red was quite low, and it reduced um, towards 24 hours, one day. But the absorption of the orange tomato increased and was at a very high level after 24 hours. So that lycopene was still circulating in the blood one day after consumption and circulating to be taken around to the organs in the body um, to have, those antioxidant benefits and that cancer prevention. So we were pretty excited about that.
And I think this is such a perfect example of taking a technology, so like the various analytical techniques that a few decades previously would have been very expensive, very fiddly, very inaccessible methods used in research labs that are now starting to become automated and affordable and accessible enough that they can be used for these other purposes. To demonstrate all sorts of things like this. It's a really
It's still actually quite expensive, but
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
just got
well,
to do these things.
I just know from going through labs in like the 90s. Well, yeah, kind of like through the 90s that yeah, it's changed a lot. That the accessibility of a lot of these methods has
Mm.
changed dramatically in that time, and yeah, it's a remarkable new opportunity. And kudos to you for jumping on that and putting the story together and making it happen. Like that's
Yes,
really remarkable.
it's fascinating because the deeper you get into it, the more fascinating it is, really.
Hmm.
So we only grow these orange tomatoes now
Mm.
within this golden to orange color spectrum. One point of confusion is that the Americans call these tangerine tomatoes,
Ah.
but in actual fact, they're not tangerine. They are within this or golden to orange color spectrum.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, I have
and when
one.
you
Oh, sorry, I have one related question. I think New Zealand has an even stricter quarantine for seed imports than Australia. How did you find navigating bringing material in from overseas? Like, how do you
timing,
work with all
we
of
we
that?
managed to get them in just before they brought in those new rules.
Ah, okay.
So initially, well, in the early days, you could import tomato seed. There were no disease difficulties.
Mm.
But then at some point, there was some disease that they were concerned about, and so they stopped importation.
Do you think there's anything that people can do to moderate that seemingly runaway paranoia with biosecurity in various parts of the world?
It's
That
a great shame because there's a disconnect
mm,
between the biosecurity regulations and, the health potential of
mm,
these varieties.
mm,
Um, we need to be able to talk to one another and work out ways and means. We have sent tomato seed to Tasmania,
mm-hmm,
uh, and that was each variety of seed. Some of the seed had to be tested.
mm-hmm,
So there is a way, or as far as getting it to Tasmania, I'm not sure. Your states probably have different rules.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question because yeah, there's so many opportunities. I mean, particularly as large institutions have mostly abandoned breeding new crops, it's increasingly falling into the responsibility of smaller organizations and amateurs to do this
Mm.
really vital work, but they don't have the resources to overcome these bureaucratic hurdles. So I don't know. I'm very hopeful that we can find some way of uh, towards a reasonable compromise that the biosecurity safety is still in place, but those key genetic resources that get really valuable projects off the ground can still get into the right hands.
Yes.
Mm,
The other aspect of the tomato research was looking at the history of tomato and reanalyzing that
mm,
because it's very much like a jigsaw puzzle and finding little pieces and seeing how they fit together and finding how some things have been misinterpreted over the years. Once you've got the science and you can see these golden orange varieties, how beneficial they are.
mm,
Um, when you look at the history of tomato, you find, from our interpretation, you find that the golden tomatoes were discovered in Mexico in about 1519 by Hernan Cortes. Uh, and they were then taken back to Spain, and Spain controlled parts of Italy at the time, so they went quite quickly into Italy. Now, in about the 1530s, Pizarro invaded Peru, and you have the Poma del Peru, the apple of Peru, which is
mm,
the tomato that was found there, which we believe was a very small red tomato growing in the wild, probably that no locals actually ate.
mm-hmm.
Uh, with the amazing amount of plant knowledge in Peru, they probably would have understood that it was not appropriate for human consumption, and so they would have left it to the birds and small animals. Um, but at some point, someone in Italy crossed the tiny red tomato with the larger golden tomato and arrived at a bigger red tomato.
Mm-hmm.
And that appealed to consumers and that took off. And the rest is history.
Well, isn't
But
it interesting that that same thing that happens today, you go to the supermarket and you pick the variety that looks the best, and you
mm,
get it home and you find it's not actually that nice.
yes,
That same disconnect is actually so much older.
yes. And in doing that one breeding step, uh, the beneficial form of lycopene, the orange form, um, which is a recessive gene, was replaced with the dominant gene, the red lycopene,
Mm,
plus intermediate compounds. Um, two of them dropped out, and somewhere I've got. Sorry, I'll just find my. Here we go.
mm,
So the intermediate compounds for tetracis lycopene are phytoene, phytofluene, zeta-carotene, and neurosporine.
mm,
Now, uh, there's no zeta-carotene or neurosporine in red tomatoes. And the phytoene and phytofluene in red tomatoes is at very minimal levels, but they're all bioavailable and at high levels in these orange tomatoes.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and when you're looking at health benefits of foods, it's the synergy of compounds which is vitally important. We may look at levels of compounds to begin with, but it really, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, it's the synergy
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
works.
There's a lot of herbal medicines, I believe, if you separate out individual components, they don't really work anymore. They have to be administered together. I have a kind of, well, I have two questions. One's really simple, one's a bit more difficult and speculative. Simple one first. When you eat these orange versus red tomatoes, are there sensory reactions that suggest people can detect that there's a difference in the nutritious quality? Because, like for some other compounds, you can at least detect the levels of useful nutrients as a way of selecting. But from people who got to eat, like in the trials, for example, of trying the orange and the red tomatoes side by side, did
Yes.
they report any differences in the experience, in the flavor, or even how they felt after eating
Oh,
them?
Not from the trials, but after the results came out, um, we got requests from those staff members for that variety of tomatoes.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we had them grown locally and sent down to the organisation for the staff members.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they obviously recognised that there was a benefit. But over the years, I've had a number of people who have said to me, look, they can't eat red tomatoes, but they can eat these orange ones.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
got a very excited email from France. We'd sent some seeds over there, and a friend said, look, this acquaintance of his, he'd eaten some of our Tangela tomatoes, and normally he couldn't eat tomatoes, but he had no difficulties whatsoever. And
Mm.
so, following from that, we advertised locally for people who can't eat tomatoes for some reason. And that year, I gave about 10 people these Tangela tomatoes, and not one of them reported any difficulties with
Isn't that
eating them.
interesting? Well, that brings me to my difficult question, and it's a bit speculative, so I understand you'll be guessing here. How do you think the Mexicans, when they got tomato material, original material, presumably from South America, where the homeland is of the genus, how do you think they might have developed these orange tomatoes over time? What does it say about their plant breeding skills and like their sensitivity to what they were consuming?
They had an amazing knowledge base,
Mm,
and they had a completely different um, conceptual understanding of the world
mm,
and plants, nature, everything.
mm,
A very deep respect, of course, for the plant kingdom.
mm,
They all talked to the plants.
mm-hmm,
Plant communication is via thought, and that would have been commonplace.
mm,
Just as people give thanks for before they consume food. It's the same sort of concept, really. So with that knowledge base, they would have worked with the plants
mm.
to co-develop them.
I also tell people too, if you don't have access to a multi-million dollar like spectrometer to analyze chemical samples, you've already got one of those in your head. Like your
Mm,
senses, your eyesight for differentiating colors, all of the chemical sensors in your mouth and your nose, and how your body feels afterwards. If you're paying attention to all of that, you can leverage it during plant breeding to do amazing things.
mm.
I think in the Western world, we're used to just paying our money, buying the product and shoveling it into ourselves without really noticing what it is and what it does to us on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, we also don't realize that people have there people have different abilities and attunements. And so some people are very sensitive and very attuned to whether it be energies or there's a number of different ways of picking up information
Mm, mm.
from foods, from plants.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world. But I mean, now we have another channel of tools at our disposal, so we may as well use them in synchrony with all of the things available.
Mm.
Now, do you have any future plans with these tomatoes that you're working with?
Yes, for several years now, we've been working with the plants to help to develop them. So we recognize that tomatoes are the most overbred food on the planet.
Hmm.
It's so easy to cross tomatoes, to breed a new variety. And of course, so much effort has gone into breeding novel varieties of all different colors and mixtures of colors, and they sell very well. People are sucked in to buy
Mm,
those, um, and it's really confused the gene pool. And so what we're trying to do is we have these varieties that are high in this tetracis lycopene, so we are planting those and trying to work with the plants to actually allow them to naturally evolve backwards. to
Hmm.
the way that they were as far as we can.
Mm. Well, a related question while we're on like imagining how plant breeding happened in the ancient world. I I I like imagining these ancient centers of crop domestication. Like Peru is a really good example in the Andes Mountains, central Mexico, and there's been other places and times in the world where the culture seemed to have a knack for taking wild species and like almost magically transforming them in a way that we don't quite understand the full process today. We can like try and brute force and replicate it with like CRISPR and stuff, but it's nowhere near the same method. And I have this vague idea that in 1,000 years' time, people will look back at New Zealand at this time in history and think the same way, that it's a center of domestication because I think there's a long tradition of taking interesting plants and transforming them in New Zealand, sometimes for like the intensive agricultural sector, but I think your work is in that same culture. It's coming from the same uh, environment. So maybe it's like right under our noses, and we just have to pay attention to what's happening today as well. It's much easier to study that than imagine the past.
Yes. I do feel that intention is so important in anything you do. And certainly when you're working with plants, if you sow a seed, the intention you have for that seed is going to impact, it's going to have an influence upon the outcome.
Hmm.
And science is trying to grasp aspects of this, but still locked in the past, I'm afraid.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm moving on to talking about apples. They're a really good example. Like so many really important apple cultivars that we have today were random seedlings that just kind
Mm.
of popped up.
Mm.
Somebody went, "Wow, look at this thing! Like, how is it so amazing?" And then it became like a cornerstone of cultures. I think the Granny Smith apple is a good recent example of that. But
I think the original Red Delicious was also a seedling.
And you've done some similar work. Do you want to tell us a bit about what's the name? The Monty's Surprise Apple, which has
Yes.
this amazing story behind
Well,
it.
that was the apple that really kicked off my journey. Um, in 2000, April 2000, I was traveling with friends in the central North Island on a backcountry road. It was a dusty country road, and we happened to stop the vehicle and get out and just stretch our legs. And there was an apple tree over the fence, covered in blackberry at the time.
Hmm.
And really, none of the locals seemed to know that it was there, but it was perfect timing. The apples were lovely and clean, and they were crisp, and the flavor was really good. And so I collected two or three apples and gave one to a nursery, an ex-nurseryman friend who was in his 80s at the time, and he said he cooked it up, and that was the best cooking apple that he had ever tasted. And I was going to a New Zealand tree crops conference in Cambridge that week. So I took an apple along and I gave it um, to a nurseryman there. And it was on the bus trip. The bus was taking us through his nursery, and he was describing various aspects of it. And he ate the apple along the way, and afterwards he said to me, "That one is worth pursuing."
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
And that's coming from someone who's probably seen millions of, or at least thousands of apple hybrid seedlings in his life.
that's right.
Mm.
And then, so that was in 2000, November 2002. Then I started asking all these questions about cancer and the relationship between the inverse relationship between uh, apples and cancer became apparent that in a Finnish study of 10,034 men and women, they found that over 34 years, the people who ate the most apples had the least incidence of chronic disease,
Hmm.
of cancer, heart disease, type 2 diabetes. And there was another interesting study at Cornell. They were testing red delicious apples and found that they could inhibit cancer cell proliferation. I think it was liver cancer and colon cancer at the time.
Hmm.
So I thought, right, we should do a study and find out how New Zealand apples compared with these red delicious apples grown in New York State. So I found a scientist at Plant and Food Research in Palmerston North, and he had just completed a study of 10 New Zealand commercial apple varieties grown in 3 regions around New Zealand. And he said to me, look, it's generally regarded that Red Delicious is the best apple in the world for human health. And I said to him, well, what about the old varieties?
Mm.
The heirloom apples. And he said, well, there's no point in testing those because no one's got the money to pay for that, and there's no big commercial orchards of those. Um, and I said, well, let's do a little test, a little study anyway. And that first year, I sent him 59 varieties, and over 3 or 4 years, I sent him 250 varieties in total.
Mm.
And Monty's Surprise, which was the name that we gave this roadside apple, tested with the highest levels of quercetin flavonoids, which we think the highest levels in the world,
Mm.
and extremely high levels of procyanidin compounds. And they are all anti-cancer compounds. And then there was a study that came out from Strasbourg, France, Dr. Francis Raoul, and he had done a rat study and tested a French cider apple called Antoinette and found that it was more effective than chemotherapy at reaching the seat of the colon and exerting an anti-tumor effect and causing apoptosis, which is natural cell suicide
Mm.
in colon cancer cells. And so I sent him all our data and said, this is what we're doing. And he immediately emailed and said, I want to test Monty's Surprise,
Hmm.
which he did. And in a cell culture testing over 9 days, he found that the Monty Surprise was more effective than his French cider apple at
Mm.
inhibiting colon cancer cell proliferation.
Amazing.
So that was very exciting.
I it makes me think about like what is the actual original function of fruits and vegetables in the human agricultural diet? And it almost reminds me of how many vegetables today were originally herbs. Like carrots were originally consumed for their seeds, like we consume like
Mm.
cumin seeds, and then they gradually evolved into a leaf herb. And then beyond that, the roots were selected to be bigger and bigger and sweeter and blander, just to kind of like bulk out the diet. And I just wonder if like originally these all of these plants were domesticated for the medicinal effects on the diet and not just, add color and variety and, flavoring to what would otherwise be a pretty bland, mix of, grains with a tiny bit of meat added in. That they could have been much more functional from day one.
Yes, I think everything's connected,
Mm,
and there's a lot more intelligence in everything than we fully understand.
mm. Um, Now, do you, well, what further work are you doing with Monty's Surprise? Like, how do you hope to continue to develop and make it more available to people?
Well, part of what we do is that we graft Monty Surprise apples. We grow rootstock and we graft the Monty Surprise onto that, and then we give these away around our community and around New Zealand. So we'll courier them hundreds of trees away each winter.
Mm.
So we initially did a study, sorry, a, a project to get as many Monty Surprise apple trees into the backyards of our Wanganui community of our city here. And so we had 5,000 trees grafted over 3 or 4 years. and given away. We gave them away to people. We wanted them to be grown in backyards
Mm.
around the city as an initiative to help to prevent the incidence of cancer.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we've just gone on from there. So uh,
A,
I'm not sure we've how many we've given away in total, but
a really practical question. How did you select the people who got the trees? Was it just anyone who asked, or did you try
yes,
and be selective?
pretty much it was anyone who asked.
Okay,
But
okay.
of course, yeah, those more in need, where we do try and get them out to communities where there is a greater need.
Hmm. Hmm.
But cancer can strike anyone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so yes, to begin with, it's anyone who's prepared to grow the tree.
Mm. And I think I also saw on your website that you've been growing some of the progeny, like the next generation from Monty's
Yes.
Surprise. Do you have any particular strategies for looking for superior uh, individuals from that population?
Yes. Yeah, so we've been planting the seeds of Monty Surprise and growing that for a few years now. And every summer we've got new trees of these Monty Surprise seedlings that are fruiting,
Hmm.
which we look at the fruit. And our strategy is really to find out what the energy of that fruit is.
Hmm.
I mean, everything is energy when you get down to it. Um, and so we do have researchers in our team who are able to determine energy.
Hmm.
So this is, yeah, as I said, some people have an affinity in different areas. And so you need expertise from different people.
I have one question too. You mentioned about intention. And I've often thought about the classical mass selection breeding trial for plants from the plant's perspective. So
Mhm.
if you plant like a field or an orchard with all of these like siblings of a cross with the intention that you are going to like kill 99% of them because you're just looking for something very spectacular and specific, that feels like such a different dynamic to just these random fluke trees that come up, in people's, waste
Mm.
ground and backyards
Yeah,
that somehow still manage to be more extraordinary than what you typically get from these mass forced trials. Do you think there's something going on there?
I'm
And
sure there is because you get volunteer plants that come up, and usually it's astounding how strong they are, how
mm,
well they develop. And so it'll be something similar. Um,
do you think something like that could be coordinated with the community, that you could have the initial selection and crossing happening in specialized institutions like yours, and then the progeny gets sent out to people's backyards with an invitation that if one of these is exceptional, let us know and put it back in the mix for everyone to share.
yes and no. The problem is with the initial crossing.
Mm,
The problem is with taking human beings taking control of the process in a way where they actually make the cross. They determine, right, I want to cross this variety with that one.
mm, mm,
That's the mistake, essentially, because they're overriding the plant.
mm-hmm,
It's really important to work with the plants and to give them an energy of intention for what
mm-hmm.
you are trying to do.
Well, to backtrack from that, tomatoes are classically one of the most in self-pollinating, like inbreeding crops around, but they're also one of the most inbred crops traditionally. Have the golden varieties, the orange varieties that you've been working and developing, have they started recovering their tendency to outcross? It's almost like you're giving them permission.
Yes, certainly with some of the older varieties, we've got some Amish tomatoes, and you can see from the flower that the bee could get in there quite easily,
Hmm.
whereas the modern tomatoes, it's all very tight and it's not going to cross.
Mm,
So certainly as a starting point, some of those old varieties are really good.
mm.
But we are finding that we made quite a few selections last year, and I imagine we will again this year. Subtle changes.
Mm.
Occasionally you'll get an obvious change, but quite often it's quite subtle changes.
You're probably blessed in New Zealand with an abundance of bumblebees as well.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. We do also put in a little bumblebee hive in each till house, but
Hmm. Hmm.
yes.
Now, you're working with kiwi fruit, and I think this is kind of like the classic example of New Zealand horticultural innovation. That happened back in the 60s, I think, the foundation, or maybe even sooner, like way ahead of the rest of the world. And unless you count like in the 1800s, I think there was a plant breeding craze in Europe and US that
Yep.
kind of got interrupted by the world wars. I'm wondering how far does this go back in New Zealand? And did they kind of miss that interruption because the world wars are on the other side of the planet, that they kind of kept that interest in hands-on crop breeding going and trying unusual things?
I think there's always been innovative people here working on different crops.
Mm,
The interesting thing with kiwi fruit is that the very first seed was brought to New Zealand to Wanganui, to the city here,
mm,
by it was the principal at Girls' College. I think she went to visit her sister in China
hmm.
at the time, which might have been 1930. Uh, and she brought seeds back to Wanganui and plants were grown. Yes, and there's some very old kiwi fruit plants here.
Mm, mm.
And then various other people have taken it on from there.
Do you think that example has served as inspiration for people in New Zealand? Like you've seen how useful a new kind of crop can be, and then you've like, well, why can't we do it again with something else? And you've
Yes,
continued
yes.
to
Oh,
follow that
certainly. And
tradition.
but it does take years.
Mm,
Uh, avocados took years to take off
hmm.
for consumers to actually try them.
Hmm.
Anything new, persimmons took quite a while.
Mm.
And they're so obvious now. But there's so much reluctance from people to try something new.
Um, on that note, if you have this very hands-off approach to the actual crossing part of breeding, how does that change your approach to selection? Like, are you growing out on scales of production, but then constantly looking for interesting variations to follow up with?
It's all about health.
Hmm.
So we're not looking for novel varieties.
Mm.
We're, we do want varieties that people will consume, that they will like to grow, and will enjoy eating. But but fundamentally, it's all about health.
Hmm. Hmm. And the health of the plant as well too is obvious if you're paying attention. I'm guessing.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I think a lot of the uh, in the US in the 1800s, that's when the seed catalogs started to become really popular, and they
Mm,
were all competing with each other for like novelties and things that would stand out in a little text description or a line drawing illustration. And I think that's where that culture came from of every year wanting to grow something like strange and bizarre and like attention getting, and we
mm,
kind of lost track of like why we were growing vegetables for thousands of years, that they were critical for our health. And it's really interesting to see that coming back, that you don't want 50 different colors of tomato, you want the one that actually keeps you and your family and your community healthy.
yes,
Yeah, that is such an
yes.
amazing change in mindset. Oh, and there's one other plant you mentioned that I really want to just touch upon. You've got an interest in the petty spurge. I think it's Euphorbia peplis or something. It grows
That's
here
right.
as well in
Yes.
Australia. And I wonder what your thoughts are about breeding a plant like that as a medicinal plant to make it more effective as a human therapeutic.
Yeah, my answer to that would be that it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's already
The
pretty much
petty
as good as you could
spurge,
ask for.
yes, the petty
Mm,
spurge is perfect as it
mm,
is. And it seems to be highly effective at treating basal cell carcinomas and squamous cell carcinomas,
mm,
certainly at their early stages. I've used it myself.
mm,
It's ideal if you've got them on the ears or on the nose,
mm.
somewhere pretty sensitive, as long as you don't get the white sap in your mouth or around your eyes,
Yeah, yeah,
and only dab it on precisely the spot
yeah.
that you want to treat.
One thing that's interesting about it too, and you mentioned this as well, that it's much more effective used fresh, which I think is a lovely anti-corporatist kind of mechanism in the plant. It's not easy to just put it in a pill or a potion and
Yes.
commercialize it.
Well, it's a
But
common weed
mm, um,
around my garden, and
w-
I'm sure, I mean, it used to be called cancerweed was one of
mm,
its names,
mm.
and I'm fairly certain it's common in Australia as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one area I wondered if it could be selected would be for more consistent growth throughout the year. I find here it's a very seasonal annual, like the weather's only suitable for it for narrow windows of the year. And I guess for basal cell carcinoma, they're quite slow moving, so you've often got like multiple years to catch up with them. But for other uses, it might be nice if there was a strain of the plant that stayed in production for a longer period of the year and didn't melt away, like a
Mm.
lot of those little flimsy annuals do.
Yep.
Mm.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, it's another one of these things. If you look back in history, there's some plants which have medicinal plants which have undergone breeding and selection, but there's so many more which are just still kind of used in their original wild,
Mm.
opportunistic form. And I don't know. I think there's opportunities for people to apply different levels of intention to bringing those really useful herbal plants closer into contact with humanity. Um,
I think we just need to increase our understanding about them, our
mhm,
awareness,
mm,
uh, just our awareness that our environment, everything, in theory, everything that we need for our health is within our own environment.
mhm, mhm.
And so we just need to look and become aware of that.
And pay attention and
Yes.
interact. Now, the second part of the conversation that I like to talk about is production methods. And the show was originally called Zero Input Agriculture because that was my interest of seeing like how low you could get the inputs and still have crops if they're the right crops with the genetics optimized for your local conditions. Um, but how does that apply to what you're doing? And also, I wonder if you want to comment on the fact that New Zealand has this very green image, but it also has one of the highest fertilizer uses of anywhere on the planet because you have a very intensive agricultural sector, which has been very successful, but there's questions about the environmental impact and the sustainability of that going forward. So, how does that all intersect from the position that you're working?
Well, you're quite right. There's significant risks in relying upon synthetic imported fertilizers.
Mm,
The risk of increasing costs, future unavailability, the risk to of environmental degradation.
mm,
Synthetic fertilizers, they're used because you can see that kick in grass growth or whatever plants you're working with.
mm,
But over time, you do need to increase the inputs, those synthetic fertilizer inputs each year to get the same level of growth
mm-hmm,
apparent. Um, and that's unsustainable. And it's also likely that at some point, um, the land will become infertile
mm-hmm,
because of that. I know with superphosphate, um, they used to use acid, types of acid to break down the rock
mm,
and get it into the right consistency for application. But the acid residues will actually kill microorganisms in the soil,
mm,
and they're fundamental to plant life. So over time, you're going to have problems
Hmm.
with your soils. And so that's something that New Zealand faces. Um, we need to move towards natural ways of growing. Uh, Organics really is agriculture 101, not using synthetic fertilizers or toxic chemicals that'll be harmful to the environment over
Hmm.
time. Uh, there's things like biodynamics, natural farming. There's all types of uh, farming systems which are beneficial
Mm.
and they're fascinating. They all work to some
Mm.
extent, and we
Mm.
need to put more investigation into those.
Mm. I wonder as well too. I mean, take the apples for example. If a consumer is ultimately eating an apple for its health benefits, and you can use industrial chemical methods to massively boost the yield of a crop, but the amount of medicinal benefit per kilo of that crop goes down like almost in proportion. That I mean, I could also imagine, almost imagine a future New Zealand rather than exporting 10 tons of like really bulked out sweet apples that don't actually have the full potential benefits. Rather than exporting those 10 tons, you could export 1 ton of very highly medicinal products that do a better job. Like they're actually serving the customer better in the end.
That's right. Um, it should all be about quality
Mm,
and the health benefits of a food is paramount in determining the quality from my perspective.
mm, mm,
So, yes, yield is a mistake,
mm.
but unfortunately, that's farmers are paid by yield.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
It,
had,
well, it's one area that where the testing technology, where you can actually look at a batch of, apples coming through and conveniently measure the levels of health benefiting substances in them, that can actually determine the price rather than just how big and how many and how sugary they are.
mm,
I think I've seen some movement in that in commercial agriculture, which is it's
yeah,
promising.
that sounds good.
Mm. Mm. Now, I want to leave plenty of time to talk about organizations and networks and like the culture around all of these kind of activities, because I think it's a really critical thing. If we do this work in isolation and then we don't share it with anyone else, it's almost as if it never existed. Like it all ultimately has to live on in other people's hands. And I want to learn more about how your organization was created and how it's structured and administered. And it might be a kind of boring, dry admin, bureaucratic kind of thing to some people, but I find it fascinating because I think we need more organizations like the one that you're running. And I want to give people little guideposts and signs and hints about what is possible.
We are a very small organization. We have four trustees. So I'm a trustee as well as the research director, and I manage the trust on a day-to-day basis. We have a high reliance on volunteers. We're a charitable trust.
Hmm.
So, our objective is to research these varieties to find the very best that we can, then to disseminate the information about them, and then to share through giving away the seeds, the plants, the trees that we can to our community.
Hmm. Do you think your background as an accountant put you in a really unusually powerful position to like make this decision to set it up as a charitable trust and to like put all of the details in motion?
Yes, it did actually.
Mm,
I'd been setting up charitable trusts, so I knew the way to do that.
hmm.
I also do the accounting, handle the GST, those day-to-day methods.
Mm,
They're straightforward when you know how to do them. They create a lot of complexity when people don't know how to do them.
yeah, yeah,
You have to have someone reliable uh, within your organization to handle all of that.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So
you've given me a bit of inspiration that I wasn't expecting to run into today because I want to set up something similar with our local bunya nut trees. It's a local native edible nut. I'm in the center of diversity of this amazing species, and there's little
Mm.
tiny pockets of remnant trees that have all of this genetic diversity scattered across the landscape that's slowly dying out. They've stopped reproducing naturally, and I would love to set up some kind of enduring organization that gathers that diversity when they produce seed to grow out the seedlings and then distribute them to the community as a non-profit activity to like
Mm.
grab that incredible resource that we have at our fingertips that's steadily slipping away. And you've given me an answer that I'll look for somebody with the relevant expertise locally to see if they can help me start moving in that direction to get that off the ground. So
Mm.
I'm extremely
Sounds like a
grateful for
wonderful
that.
project.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
timing is critical.
Mm. Oh, this is just a related thing that I meant to talk about when we were talking about crops previously. Have you looked into your local renga lily as a potential crop to work on? Because the indigenous Maori started domesticating this native species as a root crop when some of their tropical Polynesian crops didn't do so well in New Zealand. And I think it's still scattered around your area. There's old Maori gardens where these plants have hung on for decades, centuries now. It's been a long time. Is anyone working with that crop to bring it back?
Yeah, I
And
don't think there is. I've not heard of anyone working with it.
mm, oh, maybe just a little an idea to throw back in the other direction that might be useful to
Mm.
you. Now, with your organization, how have you set up interfacing with the wider community? And is it only like amateur growers, like home growers, or have you got some relationship with industry as well?
Our focus really from the beginning was for individuals, home
Hmm.
gardens.
Hmm.
Uh, the difficulty seemed to be that commercial growers were all interested in yield.
Mm.
They weren't interested in this quality of the fruit. So so we thought, well, that's too hard. We'll just ignore them and they'll catch up at some point in the future.
Hmm.
Uh, and so yes, we've just given material away and it's gone all around the country.
Mm.
We've also, of course, sent multi-surprise to Australia. It's available there online, and we've sent it to the United States, to Europe.
Mm. Yeah, it just it's spreading things far and wide. As a gardener, you know that it's really the only guarantee of keeping things alive because even the most skilled gardener has little disasters in their own backyard on
Mm,
a fairly regular basis.
yes.
Mm. Oh,
And it's interesting when you give material away, you do occasionally get material back
mm-hmm,
unexpectedly.
mm,
And that could kick off another research trial. You never know.
mm. Uh, what for practical things, what mechanisms for interfacing with the community have you found to be the most effective? Like, how do you actually let people even know that you exist to begin and then coordinate like interacting with them?
We have our website, and so people can send us a message through that. And
Hmm.
we have our Facebook page.
Hmm.
And the Facebook page, we have a young lady that we've got some funding for to employ her, and she does all of our Facebook posts. She comes every week
Hmm.
and to see what's going on,
Mm.
and that works really well.
Yeah, it's a very critical job, and it is a job. Like, it takes a lot of time and energy to do it well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organizations make the mistake of like, oh, we'll just kind of do it on the side, and it never quite takes off. It just
Mm.
isn't visible enough in the local community. People find out about things like years later and say, "I wish I'd known about this sooner. I would have gotten involved much
Yes.
earlier." Yeah, so it's very good to hear that you've cracked that problem.
Yes. We
Um,
also have a free local paper that we occasionally will put articles in.
hmm.
If we've got a tomato plant giveaway, for instance,
Hmm. Hmm.
we'll advertise that in there. And they're only too happy to put in one of our articles.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, good to know that too. Now, this is a slightly odd question, but what are your thoughts about the long-term future of your organization and like the life cycle of organizations that tend to like come and go, that they have well, nothing lasts forever, and
Mm.
if you're clever, you can plan for that and kind of take it into account. And yeah, I'm wondering like how long term are your plans, and have you thought about like what happens beyond this particular instance of this organization?
Yes, it's a good question. It is a challenge. None of us live forever, of
Mm,
course. Um, yes, and coupled with that, when you set up an organization, you hope that you will achieve the need, and then the need will no longer be there, and so
hmm
the reason for you being will disappear.
mm,
But I think the need still exists and will do so into the future. Uh, it's a difficult one to find someone to take over from me, but in my instance, I have a son who has come back home from overseas,
mm,
and the potential is there that I could train him.
mm,
So we'll just see. The, there is a lot to learn
hmm
in different aspects of what we do, and so I'm going to see if I can, yeah, see what he's interested in, what niche he would like to work with, and where he'd like to take that.
Mm. I mean, that's the trick. You want to avoid like a succession shock where somebody has to try and learn all of the things that you picked up over the last 20 years, like building up the
Yes,
organization and adding to the skills that you already had. If someone
yeah.
suddenly has to step in and do all of that at once, it's often too much of an ask for even the most dedicated person.
Mm.
Mm,
And they may seem like simple things, but yes, it's just the complexity of the amount. And when you're growing, it's all that seasonality.
mm,
It goes from one thing to another through the
mm,
seasons.
hmm
And I might be comfortable with that, but someone else taking over may find it challenging.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's just really reassuring to hear that you've like considered all of these things and that like you're taking them on, and yeah, it's something I'm going to have to potentially deal with as well one day because yeah,
Mm.
growing big, slow growing nut trees is a very long term project, and I'm just the first step in what I'm hoping to do here. So yeah, it's really,
Mm.
and I might be sending you an email occasionally, just seeing if I can get some advice if I hit a roadblock and I don't know which way to turn.
Yes. Well, I started with a mentor, or different mentors in different areas of my life.
Hmm
I had a neighbour whose father was a retired nurseryman. He's the one
hmm
who cooked the Monty Surprise apple. He was in his 80s and he used to lean on the fence and say, "What are you doing, young fellow?" when I was sort of digging holes for trees, and
hmm
and he and I ended up doing a great plum search around
hmm
when we were I was interested in plum trees, and so we put an article in our local freebie paper, and he and I would go on these trips to visit. Usually it was elderly widows
hmm
who had this property, and there was a great big plum tree at the down the back of the property, and he would talk to the widow and find out all the information, and I'd be scrambling up the tree, getting cuttings or collecting fruit or
Oh wow.
whatever. And it was a great partnership. We
Mm.
had a wonderful time, and people are so sharing,
hmm
in the gardening community, and so happy to if they've got something special to,
hmm
if they know that you're keen, um, to let you have plant material
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
try and keep that going. And
And odds are it's because when they were starting out, someone offered the same generosity to them.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And they cherish it. I have memories going back to being a child, being interested in plants and
Mm.
an old lady down the road taking me under her wing. Like, yeah, it's a very special opportunity. Now we have a final fun question that I like to ask all of the crop breeding people. if you could create a new crop or even an animal, if you have if you're a frustrated livestock breeder that never got the opportunity, if you could wave a magic wand and create some kind of new organism to like become part of the human family, what would you want to wish into existence? What do you want to see people growing or raising in the future?
Yes, I saw this question and I couldn't get over the issue of ego science, really.
Hmm.
And that's one of the areas that I don't want to be drawn into.
Mm.
It's, I don't feel that I need to create anything new. I am
Hmm.
happy to just simply plant the seeds and work with the plants and allow them to develop
Mm.
what they would like to show me.
Hmm.
And yes, because it is like with the Monty Surprise apples, if I was doing it, there's probably a certain type of apple that I would want to create.
Hmm.
But some of the ones that we're getting um, are different colors, and we've got one which is more of a yellow apple with a bit of orange, and it's got amazing levels of compounds in it.
Hmm.
And so we've named that Idun, which is after a Norse goddess who
Hmm.
had magical apples, and
Hmm.
the gods would visit her because the apples conveyed eternal life. But
Hmm.
you had to keep eating the apples.
Yeah, yeah, I love it.
And so,
Well,
yeah,
I guess it ties back to intention that you can have too much intention or too right brained intention. I've got the right side. Like too narrow, logical, focused, obsessive, like insistent intention. Whereas you can, at the other extreme, you can just have openness and curiosity about what the world can bring, what it can offer. Um, I would even think about the people who were growing teosinte in central Mexico for, I think, a few thousand years before it transformed into corn. And
mm,
nobody could have imagined what was about to happen in that little garden in a valley up in the mountains somewhere in Mexico. That yeah, there's a limit to how much humans can actually decide to force into the world.
yeah, I don't know. Luther Burbank was very clever, and
Case in point, one of his most successful crops was a random potato seedling, his russet Burbank, which is still grown on like a, million acre scale. That was just a random seedling when he was a teenager. He barely knew what he was doing, and that thing dropped into his lap out of the universe.
yes, but was it random?
Mm,
Because the more you work, uh, I find there's no such thing as a chance occurrence.
yeah, yeah.
The fact that I found an apple tree and it was the exact timing in the year
Mm-hmm,
when those apples were ready, and to stop the vehicle at that precise point.
mm-hmm,
And the tree was covered in blackberries, so it was very difficult to see.
mm,
None of the locals knew that it was there. All of those aspects really lead me to believe that we should be more aware about what's happening
yeah,
around us
yeah. Just
because
look at
it may all
history.
be for a reason.
Yeah, serendipity and synchronicity are
Yes.
in the garden. They're in the wild places. You just have to
Mm,
be open to the opportunity to go out and find it.
that's right.
Mm. That's a really lovely note to end things off on. Do you have a final plug? Do you want to remind people where they can learn more about what you're doing and possibly get involved? Because you send seed all over the world if it's possible.
Yes, depending on your biosecurity.
Hmm.
Uh, Certainly, we have a website, Heritage Food Crops Research Trust, and a Facebook page.
Hmm.
And the Monty Surprise apple tree is available in Australia. You can
Hmm.
just Google that, and as well as the United States and in Europe.
Mm. Excellent. I'll put all the
But
links to that in the show notes so it's easy for people to find.
everyone should have a Monty Surprise apple tree in their
I wish
backyard.
I could grow apples here. I think I would need really diverse genetics to adapt them to the subtropics. We're way outside of their zone.
Well, it grows right throughout New Zealand,
Mm, mm.
so it's worth a try.
Yeah, or I could just move to New Zealand and like save myself all of that heartache. I do love that part of the world. You've got a very, very special place there.
Yes, we're
Mm,
very fortunate.
mm. Okay, well, Mark, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you, Shane. It's been wonderful.
If you're looking for more, go check out my Substack. You can sign up for free weekly essays, book reviews, and all sorts of other interesting thoughts. A paid subscription will unlock the archive of past posts and the audiobook of Taming the Apocalypse, or you can buy the ebook version from Amazon or Kobo. Next week, I'll be talking to Reverend John Harris from the Church of Bern, carrying on the legacy of the KLF, who burnt £1 million in cash in the 1990s.